All right, so today we're going to talk about Jupiter in astrology. What does he mean both in the natal chart and in transit for those of you going through Jupiter transits at the moment? So up to this point, we've talked about the personal planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, as well as the luminaries, the Sun and Moon. And so now we get to a brand new set of planets called the outer planets, which are much more to do with the less surface level aspects of our experience. There's still our personality, but not as much of a personality and as much of an individual personality as, say, your Mercury sign, your Sun and Moon, especially. So this is less to do with our normal everyday interactions and more to do with a bigger view, the larger view of life. And especially as you get further away, it's much deeper, right? Now, the sign placement, very general, because as you can imagine, these planets move very slowly through the constellations. So anyone with similar signs, it's more of a generational thing with the outer planets. But once you get into the house placement, it does get quite personal. So, having Jupiter in the 7th house, for example, the house of relationships, this is someone where that Jupiter energy really does come alive in their relationships and really would shape their personality quite a bit. So it depends on, specifically the how personal it is, and houses are very personal because they're based on your birth time. And also, looking at how it's done through the signs gives it that hue. And especially if you have any aspects to personal planets from the outer planets, if you have like a trine from Pluto to like your moon, that would be very, very personal to you, shaping your moon energy. So a lot of it depends on reading the chart holistically, but generally the outer planets are much less personal on a daily sort of experience and much deeper, slowly deeper. Now Jupiter is obviously the first of the outer planets. Saturn too, not as deep as say Uranus and Neptune, but there is that gap between certainly Venus, Mars, and now the next set of polarities, Jupiter, Saturn. So that's essentially what we're looking at is Jupiter, Saturn, the next set of polarities. These are planets that essentially have to do with our worldview. They have to do with our perspective on life and how we create in life. Jupiter is our expansive energies of that, seeing what's possible, whereas Saturn is refining that, taking the inspiration and actually making it into something real. So you can see it as masculine and feminine. However, as you start to get to these outer planets, they do take on a little bit more of an androgynous sort of nature to them, but they do certainly have both polarities, as all planets do. I mean, even Mars, for example, has Scorpio energy, which is the feminine side to that. But the best way I like to look at it is Jupiter is what's possible, it's the inspiration, it's the expansion, and Saturn is the refinement and the discipline to make that that possibility into reality. So there's a couple of things you can notice about Jupiter in the sky. One is that he's very bright. He's the second largest planet behind Venus, yet he's very distant. So those two elements in and of themselves can give you a pretty good idea of what Jupiter represents. Like Venus, she's bright in the sky. Jupiter's also very bright. So it's about what we're magnetized to. What is it that we value? But where Venus was more on the daily mundane value, such as through relationships and material things, experiences that we're having on a more daily level, such as, good meal and things like that, Jupiter's much more about our ideals for the future, what we value in the long term, where we have that seeing, what we want, but where we know it does take time, and where there's also an element of luck involved in terms of it's far away, so more outside of our control, right? Venus, Mars, very much in our control. Jupiter, Saturn, yes, but less so, right? And much bigger picture. So Jupiter is essentially that, it's what we value in the big picture. So ideals, it's our visions, it's seeing what's possible, and because of that, it's just naturally a planet that we have an overarching worldview about, our overall life. So we have that top-down perspective. And with that top-down perspective naturally comes optimism, because we're able to see how everything fits together a little bit, clearer in that particular area of life or in that particular way. So because of that overarching view, we have optimism about it, and we can see how things sort of fit together with it and what could arise from it. Now, the other element that the overarching view does give us is wisdom. And that's another very important characteristic of Jupiter, is where, especially over time, we gain wisdom from that perspective. So those are two very important personality characteristics where we have wisdom, where we have that optimism and that overarching worldview. Now, there's another element of Jupiter that's not talked about too often, and this is that traditionally Jupiter ruled Pisces. And Pisces is about trust. It's about faith. And that's a big part of Jupiter. You know, because of that view, we do have this sense of sitting back and allowing life to guide us where it is meant to guide us. So that's a, you know, big part of it is where we do have that willingness to go with the flow and end wherever it is that we're going to end up. So, and through that obviously does come that that optimism, which actually leads to, in many cases, luck. You know, and then that's when we're actually looking for luck, we can see the lucky things that do happen to us. And that's a big part of that sort of energy. So there could be good fortune here. Now the, you know, the sign placement and the aspects and all this does determine the outcome of a Jupiter, either transit or a Jupiter in the natal chart. So you want to look at that. But the initial cause of Jupiter usually is from that more lighthearted perspective. And then the result does depend on the other particulars of the chart. So let's go and look at an example. Let's say that Jupiter in the 7th house. So 7th house is about relationships and one-on-one connections. This is someone who has that overarching view of relationships. And so from that, wisdom and optimism. So the way they interact is probably quite buoyant with other individuals. They have a lot of wisdom to share. There's usually that theme of exchanging wisdom through their connections, and where they could have some good luck and fortune. Now, one thing I want to say too about this whole luck and fortune thing with Jupiter is that, you know, Jupiter by himself is just feeling good. It's inspiration. But we really have to bring in the elements of Saturn, which is refining those inspirations and refining what's possible in order to make it into a reality. Otherwise, a door might open, possibility might come up, but we may not do anything about it. Saturn is more about grounding it and making it into something real. So it's important to bring in both. So this individual here could certainly have luck and opportunities through people or with people, but they would really benefit from bringing that extra dose of responsibility, discipline, and hard work to make those possibilities into a reality. So that's the house placement. You've also got the sign placement, which again, the sign is more collective in nature. Let's say an individual has Jupiter in Virgo. So these individuals have this, again, view of things, but the way in which they have that worldview is through analyzing, is through taking care of the details, is through self-improvement or just improvement in general, whether it's with themselves or, you know, whatever it might be. So if Jupiter's in the 7th house in Virgo, their approach to the way in which they're positive, optimistic, and wise is by analyzing, is by taking care of the details, is by crossing those T's, dotting those I's. So the sign is the way in which it's done. The house is the area of life in which it takes place. All right, so hopefully this gives you guys a general look at Jupiter in terms of what he means fundamentally. If you have any questions, please do comment down below, and I'll see you all next time for Saturn. Take care.